Welcome to Atlanta. We are, of course, in the state with the largest legislative black caucus in the country. We're very proud of that. I want to thank all of you for your service to our democracy. I took the voting rights of 1965 to desegregate politics in the South. In 1965, there were 7 black elected officials across the South. Within a decade, there were 1,000. By the mid-'80s, there were more black people in public office in the South than in the rest of the nation combined. And so we, of course, the most important thing on our agenda right now is voting rights. So I'd like to ask Ambassador Young and Attorney Bruce to make some opening remarks to this esteemed group of leaders.
I'm gonna pick on you, but forgive me. If y'all had gone to a segregated school like I did in New Orleans, Louisiana, everybody would have known all of the verses to lift every voice and sing. And we could have sung all 3 of them. Now, I just want to say it that way because I don't want us to forget where we came from and who it is that we represent. I mean, your grandmama knows stone in the road we trod, bit of the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. I mean, we can't get away from that. And one of the things that we have to do in any organization of which we are a part is bring the African American heritage. It's a heritage born of suffering, and it's a heritage that is born of sacrifice. It's a heritage that's born of courage, and there's been more courage in the families and institutions that produce us. We are what made America great. And we have to remember that. Now, we look to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and we look to the Congress, and we look to the President, and we look to the Supreme Court, and all of them were on our side. And so we counted on them, and we got a Voting Rights Act passed with great difficulty from Selma, Alabama in 1965. And it was renewed somewhere around 1995, and 97 senators voted for it, I think. And so there's nothing unusual about the right to vote being a national right. And it's been affirmed by a bipartisan congressional vote under a Republican president. The first was passed under Lyndon Johnson, and it was renewed under George Bush. And so the voting rights bill that this Congress voted, this Assembly voted for, is the same one that went to the other 40 states without a change, as you said. And it's just not right. It's an attempt to destroy democracy at the state level. And that's why I was glad when you all invited me to come here, because when it was on my watch, nationally and locally, I kind of did my part. But I'm sort of weighing out. But y'all are looking good. Y'all got a lot of energy, you got a lot of brain power. I mean, you got it going on, see? And you may not have all you think you need, but you have the same power of God in you, and you have the young people. Young people have never been so awake and alert as they are around the world today. Now, you can't control them, but you can influence them. You can guide them.
There's a lot of work that went on behind that verdict that Ahmaud Arbery's killers have been convicted. And without the protests, without the kids in the street, these guys would never even have been arrested. Protesting is not, we did it in the 60s, but it continues to be a critical part. And of course, as ACLU, this is part of our First Amendment rights that people have to be able to express themselves through protests.
Ahmaud Arbery was murdered on February 23rd of 2020. Trayvon Martin was murdered on February 26th of 2013. Emmett Till was murdered on August 28th of 1955. And that is 3 generations of people who have been on this stage who have witnessed murders of Black men and women throughout this nation's history. So I think one of the first calls of action is that the younger generation now no longer wants to continue to fight for justice. They want to end the war, and they want to win it to the point where Black people are now free to jog down a street without being harassed or killed. So the protests that happened, and I remember being in Brunswick because of what happened with Ahmaud Arbery, getting calls from the ACLU of Minnesota saying that there are protests happening, can you come out here and help us? And then seeing what was happening down at the CNN Center. So went down there with a legal observer vest to make sure that those protesters were not harassed by the police, because that's what the young people who are in the streets, and it wasn't just young people, it was different people from all shades and walks of life, during COVID, risking their lives and saying this is not right. What happened to George Floyd was not right. What happened to Breonna Taylor was not right. So this new energy that's happening, as Ambassador Young was saying before, of saying let's make sure that this new generation has the resources and the guidance to make things happen. And they look towards legislators like the ones that were in this room to make sure that what they're doing is right, but also taking it to another level as well. So the leadership that you had, Andrea, of saying whatever the protesters need, let's train, and we did. We trained over 1,000 people in 3 days to become legal observers in the city of Atlanta to make sure that protests, the birthplace of the civil rights movement, was actually safe here as well.
Yeah. And I think one of the really important things about the protests that took place around the country is that this was a situation where the young people took those protests into the voting booth. And so we saw around the country, you know, the election of 2020, we saw, of course, in Georgia, two senators, one a Black preacher from Ebenezer Church, sent to the U.S. Senate. And none of this possible without the Voting Rights Act. So talk about, Ambassador Young, sort of the vision of the Voting Rights Act and the critical components that you all put in there so that we could have this kind of transformation of our politics.
The last meeting we had before he went to Memphis was with Harry Belafonte, John Conyers, and Dick Hatch and myself. And we were talking about how to take the energy of the civil rights movement, and Dr. King was saying you shouldn't have to mount a march of 1,000 people every time you want a good decision made. He said we ought to be able to elect people of goodwill and good intelligence to fight those battles for us in the Congress and in the legislatures. And he said we've got to find a way to take the energy of this movement out of the streets and into the legislatures. And when he didn't come back from Memphis, I happened to be with Harry Belafonte, and we were talking about how we could recruit candidates to run for congressional seats. And it was, nobody was interested. And Harry just picked up the phone and called Sidney Poitier, and then called his wife and said, I need to get you all and Lena Horne together. We got to raise some money. And they said, what for? He said, Andy's running for Congress. I said, No, they were killing people too fast then. Why me? They said, well, you next in line. It probably is your turn now. So you running for Congress. And when it was announced that I was running for Congress, the neighborhood I live in, Joe Lowry lived in, Maynard Jackson lived in, C.T. Vivian, Bernard Lafayette, almost everybody in the civil rights movement lived out in Southwest Atlanta. They drew the lines so that they put us in a district with Noonan, Georgia, 25 miles down in the country. You never would have heard of any of us politically if that had remained. It was ACLU. And let me say, that's the American Civil Liberties Union, in case you've forgotten. They took the case. And next thing you know, they redrew the lines and put us all back in the 5th Congressional District. And we have had a black congressman here almost ever since 1970. And when we had a white congressman for a couple of years, he voted as black as every other black congressman did, because this was the kind of district it was. So the reapportionment, and there was the Title VI in the original Voting Rights Act was when the state legislatures did what they're doing now. The Justice Department had the power to come in and examine that and see if it was fair. What they've done in Georgia now, they put 2 of our best congresswomen, the 6th and 7th district. They sort of pushed those districts together so that they both are in the same district now, and they brought in a lot of people from out in the country and put it in the 6th district. And if we can't find a way to re-examine this reapportionment, we could lose 2 or 3 congressmen. All of those, every county around bordering Fulton and DeKalb was predominantly white. And the truth of it is, until a few years ago, I was afraid to drive in those counties at night alone. It was kind of that bad. Now, every one of those counties surrounding Atlanta and Fulton and DeKalb County has got a black majority in the county commission, and all of them have black sheriffs, including a black woman in DeKalb.
In Representative Mitchell's county.
Yeah, and so I'm saying that while we fight against the tricks and the schemes, the truth of it is we are an irrepressible force that are moving this country forward whether it likes it or not. So there's no such thing as losing a fight. You might get bounced around for a round or 2, but we're going to win this fight, and there's no question about that. And we're going to keep on fighting, and nobody's going to get discouraged.
Because we are sitting here at this moment in time, under the greatness of this ambassador on the stage, would you please leave us 3 things that you think we should do as we move forward in the future? Thank you.
I mean, I got elected on a Tuesday, mayor. That Saturday, I'm still not the mayor, I'm tired. I got a call. I said, who is it? He said, just shut up and get up. We got to go somewhere. I said, where we got to go? We got to go to Bremen. I don't know anybody in Bremen. What are we going to Bremen for? The speaker's wife died. You the mayor of Atlanta now, and you need to go there to show your respect. I said, I ain't going to them white folks' church. You know, they don't know me. He said, listen to me now, boy. He said, you better show these folks some respect. And there's no better way to do it than to show up at the Speaker's wife's funeral. Get up. Called my wife, said, get him up, get him dressed. I'm going to pick him up in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. We drive down to Bremen, and I said, now look, I'm not trying to change the world in one weekend. I haven't even been sworn in. I said, let's just stand in the back like good colored folks do in the South. You know, and be cool. So we did, and the Speaker was up in the front with the family, and he jumped up, came back, didn't say a word to me, grabbed me, great big guy, grabbed me down, dragged me down the aisle, and on the other side, the family was on one side, and on the other side was every governor and senator from Georgia in my lifetime. And he takes me up, and he stands me right in front of Herman Talmadge and Lester Maddox and says, y'all move over, make room for the mayor of Atlanta. And the Speaker set me down there between the two big races in the state, and I ain't never had any more trouble with him.
I'm State Representative Carolyn Hughley from Columbus, Georgia. And first I want to say to Andrea and to Chris, thank you for all the work that you've done on behalf of our caucus to help us prepare for the fight for redistricting. And we have colleagues in other states who have not gone through this process yet. And so do you have 2 or 3 tips that you can give them so they can be better prepared for the fight that's ahead of them?
Number one, talk to me. We will go ahead and help you in whatever state that you're at. I'm gonna tell you, ACLU's in all 50 states and 2 territories as well. So if you want to have that same type of information and actually look at how the process went here, we will give that to you happily. And we will talk to the ACLU in your state and let you know, let's make that connection to see how you can first battle with this. Because look, what happened, especially working with the Black Caucus, especially with Senator Butler, everything, we knew what was going to happen. You know how they're going to draw these lines. You know they are targeting black districts. So why not be reinforced? Why not be equipped with a policy arm that can help you actually fight back? And that's what it is. And if we don't win in the legislature, we'll win in the courts. We will continue to fight for you.
You know, I can't help but dream and be thankful, but when I went to Thomasville to run my first voter registration drive, she was 3 months old. This young man sounds to me very similar. I don't know whether he can quote the pages in the law book, but he's articulate like Thurgood Marshall was in 1941. Wow. So and that means that y'all ain't no slackers either. That you are ready for battle. Yeah. You got the brains, you got the beauty, you got more money than your mama, your grandmama, anybody else ever had, and more education. Everything we need, we have. So don't let this harvest pass. The work that you are doing is the work that is going to save the world in which we now live. We brought it this far. We still got a long way to go, but we didn't have cell phones. In fact, we didn't have phones in Selma. You know, and we've come so far with so little that you have so much now that I can't help but realize that the future is in good hands, and I want to thank you for devoting your lives to the service of others.